Hello and welcome, everybody. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of wherever you are joining us from tonight. I'm here on Gadigal country, and I'd love to see where everybody else is joining from. So please feel free to share that in the chat. My name is Angela Priestley, and I run a website called Women's Agenda, where we regularly report on women, and we also have made climate quite a significant part of the news that we do. I've been working with ActionAid across their leadership circle. I think I figured it out recently since 2017, and really seen some of the work evolve over that time, and have been really pleased and privileged to be able to support in running sessions like this over that time, where we can get some real insights into some of the solutions that are out there and are changing. So we are today, we're on this call, we're here to talk about the ways that women are leading climate action around the world. And as many of you would already know and be very much familiar with, is that women are being disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis. Despite that, there is some absolutely incredible work happening in the space, some of which we'll be able to talk about today. So we are very lucky to have three extraordinary women joining to tell us about the work that they are doing, and to talk about how climate change is impacting women's lives and how women are driving inclusive climate action in countries across the world. So first up, I'll go through our three panelists. So Flora. Flora Vano is a proud Vanuatu woman leading ActionAid Vanuatu team to support local women to prepare for and respond to climate change and disasters and protect their rights during emergencies. Flora joined ActionAid in 2017, and she has led responses to Cyclone Harold and last year's twin cyclones Judy and Kevin, as well as the response to COVID-19. Flora has played a critical role in the establishment of the Women Talk Together network, the platform and safe space for diverse and inclusive Vanuatu women to organise and mobilise. Flora is a dedicated humanitarian, and she empowers women in the community to claim their agency, self-determination and power. And I've been so lucky to share conversations like this with Flora quite a few times over the past few years. Flora, I'd love you to say hello. We could just see your face on screen there.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you for that. Okay, and then our second panelist is Natalie Isaacs. Natalie is the founder of 1 Million Women, a movement of women and girls who take practical action to fight climate change by changing the way they live. Through her mission, Natalie has empowered tens of thousands of schoolgirls and hundreds of thousands of women to change the way they use energy, buy and consume stuff, reduce food waste and other food choices, how they travel around, make fashion choices and invest their money. So Natalie's first book, Every Woman's Guide to Saving the Planet, was published in 2018. I think that may have been one of the first times that I interviewed you, Natalie. And her second book, Right Here, Right Now, was published in 2022. So Natalie, can we get a hello from you?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Angela.
And finally, I'll introduce Michelle Higelin. Michelle is the Executive Director of ActionAid Australia, Vice President of the Australian Council for International Development, and co-chair of the Australian Civil Society Coalition on Women, Peace and Security. And for almost 3 decades, she has worked to advance gender equality in Australia and overseas, and has served on global advisory bodies to the UN around adolescent health and food security and peace building. So welcome to you as well, Michelle.
Thanks, Angela. Hi, everyone.
So a reminder, please share where you are coming in from. And I can already see some in the chat here, which is really lovely to see, from around Australia, also internationally as well. That's amazing. So hello to Fariha from Bangladesh. Nice to see you here. Michelle, I think first up, I will go to you. Just to really set the context for the discussion that we are having, and to introduce why climate change matters so much in this moment.
Thanks, Angela. And good evening, everyone. I'm also coming to you from Gadigal land. I guess why climate change matters in this moment. Global attention has really shifted to a huge and devastating conflict in the Middle East. However, it's critical we don't forget about another crisis that has been growing in intensity year after year, and that, of course, is the climate crisis, as global efforts to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius have stalled and are now even going backwards. And we saw the impacts of this over the summer. I mean, it's hard to believe it's only 3 months roughly since we saw those devastating bushfires burning in Victoria, where families had to flee their homes. We also saw at the same time in the United States, temperatures plunged to their coldest temperatures in 150 years, at the same time as the Philippines saw back-to-back typhoons which displaced millions of people. So, I mean, while these events may seem, worlds apart, we know that they're connected by one truth, and that is that climate change is very much here, and the impacts are not equally shared. What we rarely talk about here in Australia is that with every climate crisis, women too often bear the heaviest burden. They lose access to their livelihoods, to food and clean water, and they face increased violence. With every degree that global temperatures rise, women are paying the highest price. And so this is the basis for ActionAid's new campaign launched this month, Every Degree Deepens Inequality. And our goal is to build a movement that drives systems change for women and climate and elevates the voices and leadership of the women we work with across the region, including fabulous, inspiring women like Flora, who's on the call tonight. And I'd just say that, I mean, this has never been more urgent. European scientists came out earlier this year to raise the alarm that in the next 75 years, the world could reach more than 4 degrees of global warming, which would just be absolutely catastrophic for countries like Vanuatu, for countries like our own. So there's no choice but for us to take urgent action. And hopefully later in this webinar, I can share some of the ways people listening can get involved.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. I mentioned this when you first launched this a couple of weeks ago. I love the messaging around this campaign. I think it's really important. I think especially at a time when it feels like we can lose some hope or feel like things are beyond us now. It's actually not that, because like you say, every degree matters. So every little bit of help we can give to this issue does make a difference and can make a dramatic difference. So it's really important to keep this live. So thank you again. We're getting it's great to see, again, lots of activity across the webinar chat. So there will be time to ask questions. So please do put those comments, and you might have some statements as well. So questions, comments that you can share there in the webinar chat. I'm trying to keep across it as best I can. But I will go to you, Flora, now. And I know that Vanuatu is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. Can you share a little bit how climate change is impacting women across Vanuatu?
Thank you, Angela. That is, I think the question was very valid at this point. Climate change for us, it's just not an environmental crisis for women. It's a daily struggle for us, for safety, our dignity, and our survival. So in our current society that is already patriarchy and male dominated, the impact falls heaviest on us women. And every new cyclone or every new drought or flood that comes in the upcoming days or weeks, the inequalities we are facing gets us more at risk. And when I look on across all our islands, we are seeing that women faces more on violence. It increases their risk when there's a disaster. And when we look at disaster, it comes with stress, it comes with displacement. It pushes us to the brink of where we are heading. The system that was there for us to use on disaster is not friendly for us. So we can see that the violence increased and there was no safe space that can be held There's no space that we should be able to move into to consult. We became more exposed and more isolated and less protected. So that's for our normal women, but for women and girls with disability, it triples. That triples in terms of violence. It actually gets them to a point, sometimes you'll get to them and you'll be late. They probably commit suicide and stuff. So we treat that very sort of a very focused program in getting where all the women, where are the issues. Food insecurity arises. It hits the women first hardest, because when we look at climate change impact, women will be the one providing, caring, managing all the households, and we will be providing food for the families, but forgot about ourselves. And sometimes we have to tie cloth down on our body, make sure on our stomach, so we don't feel that anger, because we wanted to make sure that our kids have to eat first. And we always put ourselves at the front line. We are the frontliners, but we're also looking at the risk that we are facing. How can we move when we are in it? We are also looking at our livelihood disappeared all in one night. If there's a cyclone, everything that we have built up over how many years gone, disappeared. And so logistically, cost goes high, and we have gone back to square one because funding are not even there for us to access. It's not simplified. We keep on looking, searching, but the system doesn't work well for women across Vanuatu. And when you look at their homes, the gardens, the marketplaces, loss and damage that happens during any crisis, can be volcanic acid rain and ash falls, can be tsunami, can be earthquake, twin cyclones. All this, it actually remove our independence, our sense of security and identity. It completely remove it when it comes to loss and damage on our homes, our garden, our marketplace, because that's where we find our safety net, our independence, because we have the choice to make what we want, not depending on the husband. And sometimes the husband put rules, and we sort of try to normalize violence, and that happens over time. And when you try to get women's right into that, the women just said, I think I'm already okay. But accepting violence is becoming a normality within most of the homes in Vanuatu, because of how women accept that. Land insecurity becomes an issue also. We don't own land, we don't inherit land, but we have to negotiate land for us to plant our crops. If we are married tomorrow to another family in another village, if my husband died, we will be pushed back to go to our family. By the time we're heading back to the family, our brothers already got our sisters-in-law there. So that depends whether they accept us back or we lose everything. So we became, some, I wouldn't say, we don't want us to be seen as product on shelf, because I think that's what in Vanuatu, when you're looking at price, some people thought they're getting us the dowry, and they get to keep us and give us rules. And I think that's what it's embedded in most of the communities. And when they give you there, you've got violence, but they will say, just give a chicken, a pig, a mat. Don't worry about that. Just forgive your husband and go back to the house. And you are living so you normalize violence. So I think that's one of the things we are seeing. When it comes to the impacts on climate change, poverty started to deepens into that. We trapped in that poverty system of that cycle because we couldn't go anywhere. There was no safe space for us. There was no go-to zone for us. So reality is climate change is reshaping the lives of women in a very unjust way. And we can only do that if we are talking with other sisters, other neighbors, other people who can assist us in, changing that. Whatever we are going, give us some hope, some opportunities that we can thrive in it. So yeah, thank you, Angela.
And we will get to some of the hope and the opportunities in a moment. And I think that what you're outlining is so important to hear. It goes back to this idea of climate change being a threat multiplier on some of the issues that are already there as well. And I think you articulated that perfectly when it comes to things, issues like the gender-based violence and food insecurity and land insecurity and deepening poverty as well. So I think these are things that are really important for people to hear and to understand, that it does extend beyond the impact of the climate-related disasters. Natalie, I'll go to you now to get a bit of an Australian perspective. 1 million women engages women across Australia to act on climate change. When you talk with women across the country, what are some of the common climate impacts that you hear about them facing?
Yes, it's a really good question. And I just wanted to say thank you to Michelle, because this campaign just is such a great campaign, and every degree matters, and every bit of CO2 we can, prevent from going into the atmosphere matters more than ever. And yeah, it's a big question, and I'll bring it back to the piece of work that we're doing right now, and we're doing a lot of work with regional and rural women across the country around the energy transition. How do we make it fair and equitable for all? How do communities benefit and prosper from renewable energy projects? And how do we engage communities on this? And the women that we are engaging, and we've got about 130 women across the country that we're engaging on this, and they are telling us that there is so much mistrust, and there's so much confusion out there, and that in the communities, and that the fossil fuel companies are fueling this misinformation and disinformation at an absolutely extraordinary level. The scale is like never before, and to add to that, there is this lack of communication from all levels, from governments and politicians engaging with communities, from the developers themselves, having consultations with communities, and it is creating this huge division. I was on a Zoom call today about this, and it was around the submission that we put in to the inquiry on this. And they were saying that the fossil fuel industry spends, I think globally, spends $4 billion a year on PR, and it is 27 times more than the renewable energy industry. And yeah, that is massive. And we need to counter that with our own stories and with our own lived experience. And because that, we need to drown that out. And it's something that 1 Million Women really focuses on, and we've been doing this for the last couple of years, really using our platform to amplify women's voices and to amplify the real and lived experiences. And I think we need to tell our stories all of the time, how you feel about climate, what you're experiencing. And I'm always saying that, if you tell your story and you can resonate with even just one other person, that you are leading, and that is powerful. And every year we do this big annual survey, and we want to know what women are thinking in Australia right now on climate. What are they feeling? And we just closed off the survey for this year. And it really helps us understand, it helps us shape our work and what we're advocating when it comes to politicians. And we ask a lot of questions, but about what is affecting us most. And of course, there's no surprise that 74% of women said that heat waves but severe heat waves and extreme weather events are, affecting them most. And but also when we asked women about their mental health and their well-being when it comes to climate change, nearly half of the respondents said that government's lack of adequate action on climate is what affects them most. And we see that year after year with these surveys. And then when we asked what helps, over 70% that said that connecting with like-minded people is what helps. Getting out into nature is what helps. And half of the respondents said that seeing the results of their own actions is what keeps them optimistic. And adding to that, last year we did this survey on household energy, and 4,000 women responded, and over 90% said that they were taking some steps in their homes to electrify their homes or to make them more energy efficient because of the cost of living was truly affecting them, the burden of that. But many told us that they were facing barriers to act, like upfront costs, and that they would act if they had government incentives and rebates to help them get off gas. But coming back to that action piece, when we asked, even though there was all this burden, when we asked about, what actions could they share around the benefits from the energy efficiency measures they put in their homes, over 2,000 women actually shared these amazingly positive stories about what they were doing, what actions they were taking in their lives to get their electricity bill down and get money back in their pockets. And so I think that comes back to the heart of what we do at 1 Million Women. Like, we don't sugarcoat climate change at all, but we don't wallow in despair. We try to really embrace solutions that we can do now in our lives, or that our communities can do, or that we can advocate politically. And we purposely, use active optimism and active hope as a strategy to stay in that place of action. And we try to reach women that may not have their, be engaged yet, or may not have this opportunity to get their voices heard, or may not be part of the climate movement. And we do what we can to empower them to act.
Just a quick one there. Just hearing you talk about that, and I mean, discussing disinformation and misinformation, and looking at the Senate report that came out last week with a number of different recommendations there. So is that something that your members now feel is part of their work, I guess, is trying to counter this disinformation, misinformation, which is, I mean, it's a hard thing to counter given that it does have such huge funding behind it.
Yeah, yes. It is absolutely core. It's key to what we do. And we do it with the power of our real lived experience. We empower women or we give women the opportunity to share their real stories to counter the misinformation. You can't take away somebody's real and honest story. I absolutely know that, because I see it every day at 1 Million Women, the power of that to stand up to the fossil fuel industry. But it's extraordinary what is happening out there with misinformation and where it's coming from. And so we just need to have, we need to be telling our stories all of the time.
Yeah. Another thing to note there is also just the extent that these disinformation, misinformation campaigns can happen, noting that they are two different things. But with AI now, how much slop can be out there, how easy it is to generate so much of this content and to be pushing out there, especially if there are well-funded machines there. So, Natalie, I do really like that idea of, like, you can't take our stories. So we can keep telling those stories and amplifying those stories and supporting each other to amplify those stories. That can ultimately help to cut through on this.
Yeah.
Michelle, just to go back to you now, because I know that you've recently returned from Indonesia, where you met with women who are bearing the brunt of climate impacts. Could you share some of your reflections from that particular trip?
Yeah, thanks, Angela. I recently visited Poso and met with a group of women there that ActionAid is supporting to adapt to climate change. It was interesting to learn more about their context, where, I mean, they told me it's somewhat similar to what's experienced in Vanuatu, where, the seasons they once relied upon for planting have changed. Rainfall has become unpredictable, heavy flooding has increased, and effectively it's destroying their crops before they can even harvest. And of course, you know, when crops fail, everything else begins to unravel. Food becomes scarce, income disappears, debt rises in families. And it was heartbreaking to hear how, you know, families desperate to survive, you know, borrow from loan sharks in order to continue to replant their crops. Then when they can't repay those debts because of continued crop failures, their daughters are pushed into early marriage as payment for loans, which we know exposes girls to increased violence and obviously pulls them out of education. And so, I mean, while that situation in Poso is incredibly challenging, the women I met with give me incredible hope. Just as Natalie was talking about how important it is that we are hopeful and we do understand that there are things that can be done to change what are quite dire situations. These women have formed women's forums in the community. They're planting climate resilient crops on higher ground where they can't be destroyed by flooding. They've established seed banks so they can ensure a stable supply of seed that can be replanted quickly and be resistant to extreme weather events. They're also creating networks of trained paralegals who can intervene in cases of violence against women and children, which increases in every crisis. And they're leading their villages to examine the disaster risks they face and to build evacuation plans for when major crises hit. So, I mean, effectively, these women are building climate resilience from the ground up, and it's really inspiring to see. And I mean, this is the kind of work ActionAid supports around the world, including in countries like Vanuatu. And I mean, it does show when we invest in local women's leadership, this can really drive effective solutions that prepare some of the communities most at risk for what's to come in the future.
Thank you so much, Michelle. To see if someone from ActionAid might be able to put in the chat the links to more on this work. Just I know that we'll do it at the end of the conversation, but just in case people want to look into some of those call to actions now, I think that could be quite helpful. A reminder also that if you do have questions, if you have comments, I will try to share them through this chat as well. So that is just there on the webinar chat, and I can again see that we've had such a broad mix of people come through, so it'd be great to get some of those questions and any comments too. So Flora, we are going to turn, I guess, a bit more to some of the hope that is there and the solutions that we're seeing and what is working. Could you share with us how women in Vanuatu are really coming together to drive women-led climate action across their communities?
Thank you, Angela. I think I'm proud to say that it was challenged. We were challenged at first when we have ActionAid come in country to work with the women. The first thing they said was women talk too much and they couldn't even organize themselves, but they're good on talking. So we try to use that narrative to put, where there's crisis, there's possibility. And if they said we talk too much, then let's make that good use of how we talk too much, putting it in where we should angle our talking to the leaders, to the government, to policymakers. So we have Women in Talk Together, the network. It was first 3,000, now it comes to 10,000. What we established with the women, we have Woman Wetem Weather, which is a multi-hazard early warning system. Because of the disasters that we were getting into, women are fairly, they're not being distributed fairly. Like they don't usually have access to the rations that they should because they are not the head of the household. So we changed that a bit by having the multi-hazard early warning system. It actually links to the anticipatory action. So what can we do? What are the 10 preparedness steps our women usually do to prepare for a disaster? The water needs to be safe. Their food, where is their finance, their livelihood? How can they keep it safe for tomorrow when it's done? They can, pick up themselves again because government won't come for their rescue. And that we knew. We knew what when we are talking with the women. So they told us, they never talk to us. We don't own radios. Our elders own radios. We don't own radios. Cell phones are also monitored by our husband. who are you talking to in Facebook and all that? Or are you talking to another person? And when you look at SRH in terms of family planning, most communities, the women, they got more kids. A family size will be 8 to 12 in one family size. But then if you said family planning comes, they will say, you are putting things that then you can sleep with all the other men. So, discriminating women at our faces. So when we have a safe space that we created for women, the women became owners of that space. They own it. So we also look at how inclusion can be part of the whole framing or the whole agenda of women. How we elevate women. So we sort of hold with Sunshine, which is the disability chapter of Women to Talk Together, side by side on our hands, and we move forward into policies meeting place where they said only one person come. We ended up three-person end up, and they said, why do you always come in numbers when we only said one? So, inclusion also, we have to make sure that the language, the framing of how we are giving out information is simplified and is in that language that is accessible for women and girls with disability also. And in our context, most of our women are illiterate. So it means you have to be extra patient when you are giving them, the women's right agenda, giving them the information on climate policy. How do you engage in those spaces? How do you hold your government accountable when they come to you the next time? Tell them you don't want pots, you don't want mattresses, you don't want chainsaws. You want your life change. You want to be transformed. You want funding that comes to you. So there are the network that we established. Also, we put in economic hubs in there. So when we look at them for continuum of the forums of Women Talk Together, we have to make sure that they are something that sustain them. So they're not only meeting in those safe space, but also putting bread on the table by just talking. Because talking also became a therapy, a psychosocial support for us women. We don't have that in our own home, not in our own tribe. In our own community, there was no place to give half a space for us women. So we try to create that own space. We have to create our own identity to be who we are, create the safe space that we want, and create the agenda that we wanted to speak on. So if we're looking at inclusion, what are the key things that we need to do in inclusion in terms of disaster, in terms of preparedness, in terms of response and recovery? So we sort of taken all that, and the approach we took was very comprehensive in a very holistic approach. So we bring in energy also into that, make sure the young girls, single mothers who just were dropped out of school can able to be the one that benefit on, because young women, they loved mobile phones. They know those texts. Older women, I mean, let's say the fun and the cool and funky group, like the age of 40 going up, 45 up there. That's the group we name cool and funky. So most of us don't usually like to go on Facebook and do all that stuff, but the younger women do. So they engage on technology. We got partners from part of Australia that came down. We've got one partner called Powerwell, who usually comes down and assists us with dismantling a unit of solar energy and putting it back together. And that's women that dropped out of school. Some of them have never even written a pen before. So that the thing you are seeing shifting was respect of women in communities, how men need to consult us before they start doing something. So we've never seen that, but two of the islands have women sitting in the Council of Chiefs. We've never had that in those part, because you are not supposed to be in that chamber. That chamber is only for male. Only tribal leads are there. We are not tribal leads. But because of the work that we do by bringing, accurate information for early warning, making sure that the communities are prepared for the disaster to come, making sure that every people, we don't leave anyone, leave no one behind agenda, we make sure everybody is in all our preparedness planning, all our communication in terms of awareness on any topic that comes through. We make sure that it is accessible for them and simplified for them to understand and contextualized to either it is at the coastal where the sea is or inland. So it is very detailed and it was rooted. And we stand in one principle is you are my sister's keeper, which means that you cannot say my worst in any places because I will pack you up no matter what. So I think that's what women are now driving at. And the leadership is going up and people are knocking on our doors. When are you coming to my island? The only thing is like, oh gosh, we don't have enough funding to come to your island. But, well, we are wanting to move that upscale woman to talk together across all islands in Vanuatu.
And that's the idea, that we need more funding to get to more islands. To get more women running these shows, right? So, and that's what we're here for. And that's what we're here to support. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's it's just wonderful results. So love to see how we can expand on that further. So Natalie, to head back to you now, what are you seeing in Australia? What does women's collective action on climate change look like in Australia? What do you see as some of the priorities and how women are mobilizing to help make that change?
So I started 1 Million Women 18 years ago, so a long time ago now, and it has really evolved for us. For me, the priorities back then was literally just getting women engaged on climate change. We had this one call to action, which was go to the website, go into this carbon calculator, cut a ton of pollution out of your life in a year, and you're on your way. And so it's that whole theory of change of where you see an action, or where you do an action and you see a result and it moves you to the next action, which is how I started. And it is the heart and soul. I guess it's always the way that we mobilize. But our work has really shifted and has evolved over the years. And I mentioned in the last question, over the last couple of years, we've been really focused on how do you engage communities? How do you advance solutions through mobilizing communities? And now we're putting regional and rural women at the heart of our energy and economic transition. And we are building this network across the country. I think I mentioned we've got 120 women now, and from the Torres Strait down to Tassie, across to WA. We've got a really big, diverse group of women. And as I mentioned in the last question, we are using our platforms to elevate women's voices to counter the misinformation and disinformation. And a big part of the work that we're doing is we're actually wanting to shape a national narrative around the energy transition, capturing the insights of women and the opportunities and the challenges their communities face in the energy transition. And to collate all of this data, we're going to be doing in the middle of the year gatherings of women across the country where women get together with other women to have this discussion. And we're going to capture it into this research report. Our program's called She Powers, so the report is called She Powers Community, and we want to take recommendations from women and their communities to government, to state and federal government, about how their communities can prosper and benefit from the energy transition. And for us, women in their communities, there is no one better placed who know the benefits and the needs of those communities than the women of those communities. So that's a different way of us mobilizing that we've kind of evolved, we've grown into over the last few years. But a really critical piece of this research, or this bringing women together, is capturing how connecting women across and within communities strengthens women's resilience and well-being, and how that knowledge sharing from community to community, from woman to woman, can accelerate solutions and can cut through the misinformation, as you know, as communities are battling against the vested interests. And so then we'll capture all of this. We'll do this research report. We're going to take this a delegation to Canberra in September, as this report is this anchoring piece. And I think when you embolden a woman, and I don't need to tell everybody on this call that, you know, emboldened women can do extraordinary things. And I think one example of that for us is last year we took a group of 23 women from across the country to Canberra. We had 26 meetings in 3 days, and we spoke to politicians across the political spectrum. And our focus was about household energy and the inequality, and how households can benefit, taking all those learnings from the surveys that we did. And we took with us a policy ask of wanting to get 1 million households electrified over the next term of government. And I think every woman shared their real story, and politicians did listen. And I think we really did help with that. That policy, like we really did influence the election with that. And I think these women, most of them had never spoken to a politician before, had never been to Canberra, and those women went back into their communities and engaged thousands of other women about the clean energy transition, about renewable energy. And on the strength of that, we then took that message to the election of clean, affordable energy now. And we kind of reached 800,000 women with that message. But it was just incredible to see what those 23 women did once they had the confidence to be able to have those conversations. And it was pretty special. In the beginning, sorry, I've probably gone over 5 minutes, but the very first couple of conversations with politicians, I was leading. I was carrying the conversation, and I promise you, by the end of day one, I was just sitting back, and the women were leading. It was really beautiful to watch that, that when you can share your own story, the confidence that brings, and the energy in the room changes. And so yeah.
Yeah, back to you sharing those stories, because I mean, really, that's the thing that you'll be the expert in, is your own story and what you've experienced or what you've managed to achieve, say, in your own home, on some of these issues. And I imagine also, I mean, the fuel crisis that we're experiencing in Australia, as we are much of the world, is that factoring into any of these newer conversations now? Are you getting some of those members, some of those 120, some of those 23 talking about that issue and saying, you know, well, actually, isn't this an opportunity to be trying to move to more renewable sources?
Yes, we're still getting to know. We've had these sessions of everybody getting to know each other and sharing. Everybody has a nuanced story about what's happening in their own communities. And I am sure that will become a really key topic. But it hasn't actually been the focus when we've been, so not yet, but it will. I'm sure.
Yeah, and I appreciate it's a very new. I mean, it feels like we've been in this current state of global conflict for a long time, but here we are with I mean, this is what, 4 or 5 weeks or so into this particular crisis, sitting on top of a lot of other crises as well. So more to come there. A reminder about any questions. I can see there are a couple there, and just a little note from a shout out from Trina, who was sharing about. So Trina was sharing about having not paid for electricity for the past 25 years since solar panels linked to the grid, but also acknowledging that but for all of us that can afford a decent solar array, the cost of poles and wires falls on others who don't have solar panels. That means, renters, people on pension, et cetera, pay much more for their power. So interesting comments there. And then also I saw that there's somebody's noted solar citizens as a group, a campaign going for renters so that they can access solar energy. So you can Google that one. That was, Trino said that wasn't me. So it was Jane Morrison who's mentioned solar citizens. And so any questions there, we'd love to get them. But before we get to a couple of questions that we have there at the moment, Michelle, I'll just hand back to you just to sort of talk through again the launch of this new campaign, Every Degree Deepens Inequality, and how you think Australians can best support women on the front lines of the climate crisis in countries like Vanuatu.
Thanks, Angela. Well, even just to link in with the conversation about renewables. I mean, let's also think about the opportunity for Australia to be investing in renewables overseas because, just like the work that Flora's leading in Vanuatu, I mean, this is going to be critical to countries that are being grossly impacted by this fuel crisis. I also see Farah Kabir from Bangladesh is on the call. I mean, we're not talking just about a shortage of fuel here. We're talking about a food crisis that's likely to ensue because of the lack of access to fuel. So we urgently need to think about ways we can scale up support for renewable energy access to many countries around the world, particularly those, facing high levels of poverty and injustice who will be, impacted by, what's to come as fuel shortages start to increase. But I guess what we'd say about this campaign is the best way Australians can support women on the front lines is actually by addressing our part of the problem and our contribution to climate change. And the basis for our new campaign is really that if every degree deepens inequality, then every climate action we take will help empower women. So for every polluter that's held accountable for the damage it causes, more women will be spared from climate-induced drought and famine. For every bank that stops investing in fossil fuels, more communities will be protected from the stress and violence that climate disasters bring. And for every wealthy, high-polluting country like Australia that pays its fair share of climate finance, more women will be able to protect their crops, livelihoods, and their futures. And so I think it's always important for us to remember that Australia is one of the leading exporters of fossil fuels in the world. We are part of the problem. And so the solution really lies in us thinking about what we can do collectively here in Australia to address that. And our campaign has 3 goals. We're looking at how to promote a fossil fuel-free feminist future by pushing on Australia to urgently phase out of fossil fuels in line with the 1.5-degree goal in the Paris Agreement, and for Australian banks to stop financing new projects. The campaign's also focusing on how we can fix the finance by ensuring that the Australian government and the fossil fuel industry pays its fair share of climate funding that's needed to support communities like Flora's on the front lines of the climate crisis. And I guess our third goal is really around women-led climate action. So how do we make sure there's greater investment in this? We know women in Indonesia, in Vanuatu, they have the solutions. What they need is investment. And I will say I can see we've just put in a link to our campaign around the banks, which has been running for a while now, but we're telling ANZ, which is Australia's biggest financier of fossil fuels, to stop funding coal, oil and gas. So if you'd like to join that action and write to the CEO of ANZ, please join in. But we'll be taking a number of actions over this next year and well beyond that are really designed to elevate these issues. We have some great opportunities this year. While we're not hosting the UN Climate Conference, COP31, we are presiding over the negotiations, and we're also supporting a pre-COP in the Pacific focused on climate finance. So these are great opportunities for us to push on the Australian government to do more. And also in less than a month, the global feminist movement's coming together as part of Women Deliver, which will have a very strong focus and issue a powerful call for urgent action on gender equality and climate change. And I saw a question in the chat just around how we're collaborating. I mean, effectively, this is where we're working with Natalie through 1 Million Women, the Women's Climate Congress, and other organisations that are part of the Feminist Climate Collective to make sure our voices can be heard. They can be loud, they can be unified, and we can push on Australia and other governments for more urgent action. And you know, through ActionAid, we're trying to build a community of feminists, both men and women, who are keen to learn together, grow their skills together, and take action for a future that ends fossil fuels, shifts finance from the causes of the climate crisis to the solutions, and champions women's leadership. So I guess we hope everyone on this call will sign up. And I know my colleagues will share a link where you can sign up and join the campaign. And also, please definitely reach out to your friends, family, get them to sign up, and let's expand the movement who are working towards this, because, you know, every climate action empowers women, and every degree we prevent from warming this planet is a degree that will protect the dignity, safety, and future of women around the world. So we really hope, you know, everyone will join.
Great. Thank you. I mean, that was such a lovely way to wrap up. I know you did get to some of the questions there as well in those final comments, Michelle. I guess one final question from me, a nice way to end, would be just if we could get one final take-home message from each of you. So I'll go back to you, Michelle, at the end there, but maybe first to you, Flora.
I think for me, my final call would be, you know, stand in solidarity with the women. And, you know, when we resource women, women rise, and so is the country or the region or the state will rise with it. But if you do not resource women, then nothing can go well. We are also alternative to the resilience that we are making in our own homes. So phase out of fossil fuel. And I'm really hoping that everyone on that call will take it seriously to start joining us on that campaign. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Flora. Natalie, to hear from you.
Okay, just to go to Michelle's point on banking. Also, one big thing is to just have a look at where your superannuation is, and to make sure that it is not invested in any fossil fuels, because sometimes it could be silently doing that and you're doing all this other stuff, and but your super is doing that. So that's a big one. But my last message is about storytelling. So we put a little story on our social media the other day, and it was that climate deniers are only 10% of the community, only 10% of our community, but we perceive them to be so much more. But they are actually the minority. They just have a really huge megaphone. And so every climate story we tell really, really matters.
Yes, they do happen to have a big megaphone and maybe a little less shame sometimes too. So, Michelle, to hear from you with the final message for tonight.
Yeah, look, I have so many messages, but what I would just say is every degree counts. I mean, this is the reality for women on the front lines of the climate crisis, that there is an urgency for us to take action, and there is so much we could be doing here in Australia that will make a huge impact over the longer term for communities like Flora's. So I guess my message is let's not forget about our sisters overseas. Let's make sure our climate efforts focus, yes, here at home, but also focus on what we can do in solidarity, but also to recognise our role in the problem. We have an urgency to act, and I believe that collectively women can make a huge difference in turning the tide around climate change. So really hope everyone will join up, join the campaign and some of the collective actions that we've talked about tonight, because there is a lot we can do, and we have to continue to have hope and work together across organisations, across alliances, and across countries, so that we can have an impact on this issue. But and I just say a huge thank you to everyone who's joined the call tonight.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michelle. And a big thank you to our panelists and also to everyone who has joined. And I can see the link for the Every Degree Deepens Inequality is up there in the chat. You might need to go back a couple of minutes or two. Maybe we can reshare it again. But yeah, please go and sign up for the campaign. It's a good one. It's a nice, memorable one. It just makes a lot of sense at this time and for this particular moment. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. And I think we'll wrap up from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angela.